The sun was just beginning to rise over the vast, open plains of Wyoming. A golden glow stretched across the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it the distant calls of wild horses. Among them was Thunder, a magnificent black Mustang with a mane as wild as the wind itself. He was a leader, strong and fearless, known for his speed and resilience. His herd depended on him to guide them through the harsh terrain, to find food and water, and to protect them from lurking dangers. But on this day, fate had something different in store for him. Thunder had wandered farther than usual, his instincts pulling him toward a new source of water. The summer had been unforgiving, and the streams that once flowed freely had begun to dry up. He sniffed the air, catching the faint scent of moisture, and followed it into a valley surrounded by towering red rock formations. He moved cautiously, his hooves kicking up dust as he trotted forward. The land was unfamiliar and something about it felt wrong. His ears flicked forward, alert, his nostrils flaring as he took in the scents around him. And then, in a single misstep, the ground beneath him gave way. His powerful body plummeted down, his front legs scrambling for a grip, his hooves clawing at the loose earth. A deafening crash echoed through the valley as he fell, down into the darkness below. The world spun around him. Rocks and dirt rained down, scraping against his coat. The impact was sudden, jarring. His body hit the bottom of a deep, abandoned water well with a sickening thud. For a moment, everything was silent. Thunder lay still, his sides rising and falling with shallow breaths. Pain pulsed through his legs, his ribs aching from the fall. He struggled to stand, his hooves slipping against the damp, muddy ground. The well was deep, too deep. The walls were steep, made of crumbling dirt and stone. He was trapped. Above him, the sky was nothing more than a distant circle of light. He let out a distressed whinny, a desperate call for help that echoed up through the well. But there was no response. His herd had moved on, unaware of his fate. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, casting harsh rays into the well, but the heat did nothing to dry the thick mud that clung to Thunder's legs. He tried again to stand, his muscles trembling with effort, but exhaustion was beginning to set in. The struggle had drained him. His breathing grew heavy, his head lowering in defeat. If help didn't come soon, he wouldn't make it. And then faint footsteps. They were distant at first, barely noticeable over the sound of the wind. But they grew louder, approaching with purpose. The Mustang's ears twitched, his body tensing. He let out another weak whinny, his last plea for survival. The footsteps stopped. A moment of silence. Then a voice, soft but urgent. "What in the world?" A rancher named Jack stood at the edge of the well, his eyes widening at the sight below. He had been out checking his cattle when he heard the strange sounds, the desperate calls of an animal in distress. He never expected to find a wild horse trapped in such a place. Jack knew time was running out. The Mustang was weak, his head hanging low, his breathing shallow. He needed help, and fast. Pulling out his phone, Jack made a call. Within minutes, a small team of local ranchers and animal rescuers arrived. They peered down into the well, concern etched across their faces. The walls were unstable, the risk of collapse high. Getting Thunder out wouldn't be easy. They had to act quickly. A plan was formed. Ropes were secured, a makeshift harness was prepared. One of the rescuers, a woman named Sarah, volunteered to be lowered down. She was small but strong, her years of experience with wild horses making her the perfect choice. The descent was slow, careful. The walls of the well crumbled slightly as she made her way down, dust and dirt falling around her. When she finally reached the bottom, she placed a reassuring hand on Thunder's side. "Hey boy," she whispered. "We're gonna get you out of here." The Mustang barely reacted. His strength was fading fast. Sarah worked quickly, securing the harness around his body. Above, the team tightened their grip on the ropes, ready to pull. "On three," Jack called out. 1, 2, 3. With all their strength they pulled. The harness tightened, lifting Thunder off the ground. He struggled weakly, his body swaying as he was slowly raised toward the surface. The walls trembled, loose dirt cascading down, but they didn't stop. Inch by inch, the Mustang rose higher. His ears twitched, his eyes widening as fresh air filled his lungs. He could see the sky now, feel the warmth of the sun against his coat. And then freedom. With one final pull, Thunder was lifted out of the well. He collapsed onto the ground, his body trembling, his breaths heavy. The team rushed to his side, checking for injuries. Miraculously, despite everything, he was alive. Jack knelt beside him, offering him water, his voice calm and soothing. "You're one lucky fella." Thunder lay still for a moment, his muscles weak from exhaustion. But slowly he began to stir. With a deep, shuddering breath, he pushed himself up, first onto his knees then onto his feet. A hush fell over the group as they watched. The Mustang stood tall, his mane flowing in the wind, his eyes sharp and alive once more. He took a few tentative steps, testing his strength. Then, in a sudden burst of energy, he reared up, his powerful legs kicking into the air. A victorious cry echoed across the land. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, Thunder turned and galloped away, back toward the wild, back toward his herd. Jack watched him go, a small smile on his face. "Run free, boy." As the sun set, painting the sky in fiery hues, Thunder disappeared into the horizon. A true survivor. A legend of the wild. Thunder's hooves pounded against the earth as he galloped through the open plains, his heart still racing from the ordeal. His muscles ached, his body was weak, but his spirit burned stronger than ever. The wind rushed past him, carrying the scent of the land, of freedom. He had escaped the jaws of death, but his journey was far from over. The herd. His mind pulsed with urgency. Had they moved on? Had they even noticed his absence? Thunder had led them for years, guiding them through droughts, storms, and harsh winters. But now, for the first time, he had been left behind. He pushed himself harder, ignoring the pain, his legs carrying him across miles of rugged terrain. The land stretched endlessly before him, rolling hills, towering cliffs, and dry riverbeds. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the earth. Then, movement. In the distance, beyond a grove of twisted juniper trees, a group of horses stood grazing. Their coats shimmered in the fading sunlight, tails swishing lazily. His herd. Relief flooded through Thunder's body, but it was short-lived. Something was wrong. The horses were restless, their ears flicking in all directions. He could hear the distant howls of coyotes, the rustling of movement in the brush. Danger. His heartbeat quickened. As he drew closer, he saw them: wolves. A small pack circling the herd, their eyes glinting with hunger. The lead wolf, a massive gray beast with scars across his muzzle, prowled forward, testing the horses, waiting for the right moment to strike. Thunder skidded to a stop, his breath ragged. He had just fought for his own life. Now he would have to fight for theirs. Without hesitation he charged. The ground trembled beneath his weight as he let out a powerful, piercing cry, a challenge, a warning. The herd turned sharply, their eyes wide with recognition and fear. The wolves hesitated. They hadn't expected this. A lone Mustang, battered but unbroken, standing against them. Thunder didn't slow down. He barreled forward, his muscles screaming in protest, his hooves kicking up dust. He reared up, slashing the air with his front legs, his nostrils flaring with rage. The lead wolf snarled, but he didn't retreat. Instead he lunged. Thunder twisted just in time, his powerful legs delivering a swift, crushing kick. The impact sent the wolf sprawling, yelping in pain. The others hesitated, glancing at their fallen leader. And then they ran. The pack disappeared into the shadows, vanishing into the wilderness. Thunder stood tall, his chest heaving, his body trembling from exhaustion. But he had done it. He had protected them. The herd moved toward him, cautious at first, then quicker. A young filly nudged his shoulder, her eyes wide with admiration. The others followed, pressing close, recognizing him once more as their leader. For the first time since the fall, Thunder felt whole again. He had survived the well. He had survived the wild. And now he was home. But the wild was never still. Far beyond the hills, beyond the canyons and deserts, storms were brewing, both in the sky and in the hearts of those who sought to capture the untamed. And Thunder's fight was only just beginning. The wind howled across the open plains as night settled in. Thunder stood at the edge of a rocky outcrop, his dark mane whipping against the cold breeze. The herd had gathered close, their bodies huddled together for warmth. The danger had passed for now. But deep in his instincts, Thunder knew peace never lasted long in the wild. Far in the distance, the low rumble of thunder echoed through the sky. The storm was coming. His ears flicked toward the sound, his instincts sharpening. Rain could bring life, but it could also bring destruction. Flash floods, landslides, and rivers swelling beyond their banks. He had seen it before. He had lost friends to it. He turned his gaze to his herd, counting each one silently. The filly who had nudged him earlier stood close to her mother, her wide eyes reflecting the moonlight. She was still young, too young to face the dangers of the wild alone. Thunder knew they had to move before the storm hit. With a sharp whinny, he signaled the herd. They lifted their heads, ears twitching, waiting for his lead. Then, with a powerful step, Thunder turned and began the journey toward safer ground. The night stretched on, each hoofbeat echoing against the vast emptiness of the land. The sky darkened further, the stars vanishing behind heavy clouds. Then, something changed. A new scent in the air. Not just the storm, not just the dampness of oncoming rain. Something else. Something unnatural. Thunder slowed, his muscles tensing. The herd sensed it too. The older Maras huffed nervously, the younger ones shifting uneasily on their hooves. And then, light. Blinding, artificial light. It cut through the darkness, illuminating the grass in harsh, white beams. The sound of engines followed, growing louder by the second. Trucks. Humans. Thunder's nostrils flared. He had seen them before. Men with ropes, with loud voices, with cages that locked away the wild. A sharp, whistling crack split the air. A lasso. The herd erupted into chaos. The younger horses panicked, bolting in every direction. The older ones tried to shield them, but the men were quick, too quick. Thunder spun, dodging as a rope shot toward him. He reared up, kicking wildly, striking the air as he let out a furious cry. But they weren't after him. They were after the filly. She shrieked as the rope looped around her neck, tightening as she struggled. Her mother reared up beside her, her eyes wild with terror, but the men were faster. They pulled hard, dragging the filly forward. Thunder's heart pounded. He couldn't let this happen. With a burst of speed he charged. The ground shook beneath his powerful strides, his breath steaming in the cold night air. He rammed into one of the men, knocking him off his feet. The others shouted in alarm, their ropes flying, but Thunder dodged and weaved, kicking up dust in a storm of fury. The filly struggled, her small legs thrashing against the rope. Thunder knew he had only one chance. He lunged forward, snapping the rope with his teeth. The filly gasped, her tiny body stumbling back in shock. Go! Thunder whinnied, nudging her toward the herd. She didn't hesitate. With a final burst of strength, she sprinted back to safety, disappearing into the night. But Thunder had no time to escape. The men were ready. Another rope flew, this time looping around his neck. It tightened fast, yanking him backward with brutal force. He reared up, thrashing, his hooves slicing through the air. But the men were strong, their grips unyielding. The second rope caught his legs. Then a third. He fought. He fought with every ounce of strength left in his body. But the more he struggled, the tighter the ropes became. His breaths grew labored, his vision blurred. And then, darkness. When Thunder awoke, the sky was gone. The open plains, the endless wind, the scent of freedom, all of it was gone. Instead, there were metal bars. A cage. His heart pounded in his chest as he stumbled to his feet. The ground beneath him was no longer soft earth but cold, hard concrete. The air smelled of oil, sweat, and something else, fear. Other horses surrounded him, their eyes dull, their bodies pressed against the bars of their cages. Some were young, barely old enough to stand on their own. Others were older, their spirits broken. A prison. Thunder's muscles tensed. He wasn't meant to be here. None of them were. He pressed his head against the bars, testing them. They were strong but not unbreakable. A man's voice echoed through the building. He's a fighter, that one. He'll fetch a high price. Thunder's ears flicked forward. The voices were getting closer. A door creaked open. Footsteps. Then a face. Jack. The rancher who had saved him from the well. Thunder's breath hitched. Jack's eyes widened, shock flickering across his face. You, he whispered. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jack turned, his expression darkening. Where did you get this horse? Found him last night. Almost took down 2 of my men, one of the captors said with a chuckle. He's got spirit. Gonna be worth a fortune. Jack's jaw clenched. He looked at Thunder, then back at the men. Not if I buy him first, he said. The men laughed. You serious? Jack pulled out his wallet. Name your price. Pause. Then a smirk. 5,000. Jack didn't even hesitate. He counted out the bills, slamming them onto the table. Done. The men exchanged glances but took the money. Jack turned back to Thunder. His expression softened. Let's get you out of here, boy. The cage door swung open. Thunder hesitated for only a second before stepping forward. Freedom. But it wasn't over. Because Thunder wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. His herd was still out there. And he would return to them. No matter what it took. The trailer door creaked as Jack led Thunder inside. The scent of hay and old leather filled the small space, but it wasn't home. It wasn't the wide open plains where the wind ran free. Thunder's muscles tensed. The ropes had been cut from his body, but the memory of their tight grip still lingered. He had been caged, trapped, and taken from his herd. But he wasn't broken. Not yet. Jack stood at the edge of the trailer, his rough hands running over Thunder's coat. "You've been through hell, boy," he muttered. "But don't you worry. I'll get you back where you belong." Thunder's ears flicked forward. The man's voice was steady, calm, just like it had been the day he pulled him from the well. Somewhere deep inside, Thunder knew Jack wasn't like the others. He wasn't a captor. He wasn't a hunter. But trust wasn't something Thunder gave easily. The trailer door shut and the engine rumbled to life. Hours passed. Thunder swayed with the movement, his hooves shifting against the wooden floor. The night stretched on, and the scent of gasoline and asphalt filled his nostrils. This wasn't his world. He didn't belong behind walls. Then, something changed. The air smelled different. Fresh, crisp, wild. The truck slowed. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. Then silence. Jack stepped out, his boots hitting the dirt. A moment later, the trailer door swung open. Moonlight spilled in, washing over Thunder's coat. He blinked against the brightness, his nostrils flaring as the wind carried familiar scents: grass, water, the distant call of an owl. Jack didn't hold a rope this time. He didn't try to force Thunder out. He simply stepped back and whispered, "Go." Thunder hesitated. 4 days he had been trapped, pulled from his world, stolen from everything he knew. Now the door was open. The choice was his. He stepped forward, his hooves clicking against the ramp. His muscles tensed, expecting resistance, expecting another trap. But there was none. And then he ran. The wind roared past his ears as his legs carried him forward, faster, faster, until the ground blurred beneath him. The trees rushed by in a streak of shadows. The stars stretched endlessly overhead. He was free. But he wasn't done. His herd was still out there. He had to find them. Thunder ran through the night, his instincts guiding him. The scent of his kind was faint but there, carried on the wind, buried beneath the earth. He followed it, weaving through valleys, across streams, over rolling hills. Then just before dawn he saw them. A dozen dark figures stood on a distant ridge, their heads lifting as he approached. His heart pounded. Would they accept him? Had too much time passed? He let out a sharp, commanding whinny. The herd turned. A moment of silence. Then, the leader, an old stallion with a jagged scar across his chest, stepped forward. His ears twitched. His eyes locked onto Thunder's. A test. Thunder knew what he had to do. With a powerful kick of his hooves, he charged forward. The old stallion met him head-on, their bodies colliding in a cloud of dust. They reared up, hooves slashing, muscles straining. Thunder felt the burn of exhaustion, but he didn't back down. He had fought for his life. He had fought for his freedom. He would fight for his place. The stallion lunged again, but Thunder dodged, twisting at the last second. With one final surge of strength, he reared up and struck, his hooves slamming against the stallion's shoulder. A grunt. A stumble. Then the old leader stepped back. Submission. The herd watched in silence. Then one by one they moved forward, surrounding Thunder, accepting him. He had done it. He was home. The sun broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the plains. Thunder stood tall, his breath steady, his body worn but unbroken. He had survived. He had fought. And now he was the leader. The wild was his once more. But deep in his heart he knew one thing. The fight for freedom never ends.